The next section more specifically deals with the company of a shaykh. So in the previous section, we highlighted the importance of good company and high and elevated company through the Sadiqeen. Now we're going to be a little more specific and talk about the concept of the company of a shaykh in this global framework of Tasawwuf. So in the spiritual sciences, one seeks the company of a shaykh and striving students. So let me take a step back and explain that in the sciences of spiritual development, there's classically a teacher, and the teacher is called a shaykh. And there are students that are surrounding that teacher in order to be able to learn and benefit and keep the company of that teacher, and those are going to be the students. It's like any field. When you go to medicine, you have an attending, and the attending has residents around them that are learning from them in order to develop. When you go to a classroom, you have a professor, you have students around that professor who are learning to develop, who are learning a particular field of knowledge. So in the spiritual sciences, when a person seeks a teacher, they seek a shaykh. And in addition, they seek the benefit of the classroom. Now understand that there's two things that are being sought. We're seeking the shaykh, or a shaykh, and the classroom, because we need that environment. Just like you need an environment to learn. One of the great benefits of going to Harvard is that you're with a bunch of other people that are at Harvard. And those people are going to drive an individual towards excellence by being in that environment that's so igniting. It just impassions a person to learn. So inspiring, put it that way. It's so inspiring. I mean, you go to some of these institutions, you just look at the buildings, you feel like doing a PhD. I think I've given a talk on that in the past, but sometimes I go to some of the buildings at our University of Chicago. I look at the bicycle rack outside, it's in the shape of DNA, and I myself feel like doing a PhD. So there's an inspiration that occurs from the classroom, from the environment. And that's one of the key features of how we seek good company in the science of Tasawwuf. Now, the idea here is that this interaction is acting as a surrogate for the greater interaction of the companions with the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ obviously was the source of deen, and the companions were the perfect generation, the amazing generation that, the best of generations, let's say it that way. They were the best of generations. And in that interaction, there was tremendous benefit. And let me make very clear, Sahaba benefited just as much from the silence of the Prophet ﷺ as they did from his words. The Sahaba benefited just as much from the silence of the Prophet ﷺ as they did from his words. Because they would simply sit in his company and that would be elevating for them. And this was true historically of the generations that came after them as well. So what we're really trying to achieve is we cannot achieve, now of course, let's make something very clear. If we lived 1400 years ago, the only place to go would be in the gathering of Rasulullah ﷺ. But we don't have that opportunity. So we make the best of it. We make the best of it by seeking out individuals and putting ourselves in the metaphysical gathering. You understand what I mean by metaphysical? Not the physical gathering, but the one that's not bound by time and space. So, for example, if I sat with my teachers, and they sat with their teachers, and they sat with their teachers, and they sat with their teachers, eventually they sat with the companions, and they sat with the Prophet ﷺ, that becomes a metaphysical gathering of continuity. So we're seeking this metaphysical gathering of continuity. Now, by sitting in the company of our teachers, we then gain through that interaction, and we take as much benefit as we can, recognizing the limitations. Now, of course, there's no prophets, and there's no companions. It's a two-way street, by the way. There's no prophets, and there's no companions, but we recognize that it's a surrogate. It's the best that we can do. So this engagement between a student and a shaykh, it needs to be informed by certain qualities and characteristics, so I want to just discuss those. Number one, it starts with need. Both individuals in this relationship are in need. The shaykh is in need of the students to create an environment that motivates them. And the students are in need of the shaykh to have a teacher that can guide them along the path. It's like any educational setup. I benefit more from my students than they benefit from me in every dimension of my operation. Meaning, I teach in medical school, okay, so I'm a professor, I teach in the medical students, and I can tell you, no doubt in my mind, every lecture I ever give, I benefit way more than the students benefit. They create an environment that allows me to excel. And I depend on that, and I'm grateful for that. And it's exactly the reason why I stay in my role as a professor at the University of Chicago, is because I get to interact with the best students in the world. And they challenge me, and I have to think twice what I'm going to say, and am I up to date? Am I making sure that I fine-tuned my presentation, and I spend hours and hours. I give a 45-minute lecture, and sometimes it takes me 20 hours to prepare a 45-minute lecture. I could tell you last week, and now we can leave the domain of medicine for a minute. Last week I gave a zakah seminar. I don't know how many hundreds of hours I put into that. And that was the second or third time I was doing it. And I still have things I want to do for it. But if I didn't have anybody to share that with, I'm not going to be motivated. I'm not going to have the passion, as much of a passion. I should, ideally in an empty world, I should be as passionate. But we need environments. So, number one, there's a need. The students benefit from the company of the Shaykh just as much as the Shaykh benefits from the company of the students. Number two, there's a love. This relationship is informed by love. The Shaykh has a love for the students as they do for their own children. And the students have a love for the Shaykh as they do for their own father. Now, again, the Shaykh is not a father, and the students are not their children. But I'm talking from a spiritual dimension here. It's as if the students are spiritual children, and it's as if the Shaykh is a spiritual father. And, that's the nature of this relationship. That's the way it works. That's how people benefit. And Allah puts it in the hearts of the teachers and the students, but that's essentially, this is a relationship of love and concern. It's also bound by respect. The Shaykh respects and understands the students and wants to elevate the students and get them to where they can be at their best. And the students have a respect for the teacher. They recognize the limitations of the teacher. They recognize that the perfection of the teacher doesn't lie in their being perfect, but instead in their intention to benefit as much as possible. So there's a tremendous respect that arises in this interaction. It's also informed by good intention. It's informed by good intention, meaning the Shaykh has an intention, a sincere intention to benefit anyone who wants to be a sincere student. And the student has an intention to treat and benefit and take from the Shaykh to the best of their ability. And all of this is clouded in imperfection. This is a very oft understood principle in this day and age, because we just think everything should be perfect. But let me make very clear, all of this is clouded in imperfection. The students are not perfect, and the Shaykh is not perfect. They are all human beings aiming for the pleasure of Allah. And if a teacher thinks that the students are going to be perfect, then the teacher is going to be disappointed and is going to lead to a lot of stress in the relationship. And if the students think the Shaykh is going to be perfect, they're going to be disappointed, because there are no perfect Shaykhs, ever. The prophets, one exception. Beyond that, there is no perfection. So we have to appreciate this. And by the way, this applies to all fields of Islamic learning and all Islamic science. There's going to be imperfections in all teachers. It applies even, by the way, in our lives. I mean, if you think your parents are going to be perfect, it's not going to work. That's not why we respect our parents, because they're perfect. We respect our parents because they're our parents. And if parents think the children are going to be perfect, it's not going to work. It doesn't work that way. The parents love their children despite their imperfections. By the way, carry this one step further. You can apply this to marriage. These same principles, every one of them, applies to marriage. You think that the husband is going to be perfect? Not going to get very far. Or you think that the wife is going to be perfect? Not going to get very far. It is clouded in imperfection. And this relationship is no different. For some reason, people have this idea that when I come into the company of the mashayikh and the students, I'm going to find perfection. The students are going to be perfect and the teacher is going to be perfect. No. They'll look at the students and they'll say, well, wait a minute, how come he's like this and he's like this and she's like this and he's like this and how come this person acts like this? No, this is a hospital. You're going to find patients here. Or they'll look at the shaykh and then they'll ignore 10 things and find one. Well, there's no perfection. If that's what you were looking for, then you came to the wrong place. Yes, you'll find good intention. People are well-intentioned. They're all seeking. They're all striving. They're all trying their best. And that's what really this relationship is sort of a key cloud that we have to appreciate surrounding this entire relationship. This relationship is one of the heart. Again, that need, that love, that respect, that desire, that's all coming from the heart. Just as an example of this, the Prophet ﷺ once said, some people have remained behind us in Medina, and we never crossed a mountain path or a valley, except they were with us as they have been held back by an excuse. This is a statement, a hadith, in which the Prophet ﷺ is describing some individuals who were not able to join on an expedition. Now you know that the Prophet ﷺ would make expeditions on occasion, and he would take out, the people would go with him, and it was generally, if the Prophet ﷺ was on the expedition, generally the whole community was out, and they were all expected to be out. But on some rare occasions, there were individuals who were not able to go, not because they had hypocrisy in their hearts, but because they had a true excuse. But even with that true excuse, their hearts were so desirous to be there that it would almost kill them. You know, think, the person got left behind in Medina, but their heart and mind is basically with the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. So here the Prophet ﷺ is saying that the power of this desire and love is so strong that it's as if those people are with us physically. So again, some people have remained behind, and we never crossed a mountain path or a valley except that they were with us because of they've been held back by an excuse. Now this is important because sometimes people people have a misunderstanding that, number one, when there's the gatherings and the company of the shaykh, that they have to be there all the time. That's not the case. Their heart should be there, but there's going to be reasons for them to be away. They've got family, they've got responsibilities, they may live in another place, they may have parents that they need to take care of. Those are all acceptable. It's not an expectation that when a student presents themselves and decides to study under a shaykh, that they need to be always present and constantly there. What's understood is that their heart is there. They have a love, they have a desire to develop themselves, they have a love for the teacher, but they have responsibilities. So this is an important feature to understand, that it's the key binding thread here is love. And that allows for people to benefit even if they're away. Now look, these people benefited, right? They were with them in every valley and every mountain. Even though they were away, they were with them on every single up and down because their heart was connected. Sometimes people will email me and say, I'm interested in becoming a student, but I live in this place or that place or on this continent or that continent. And again, I usually tell them that distance does not preclude benefiting if this is where you think you can place your heart. So really the key thing is, are you comfortable placing your heart? Now, of course, if you can find an opportunity locally, that's probably going to be better for an individual. It's probably better for that person, and I would encourage that, and I always do when I speak with people. But if for some reason their heart's here, then their heart is here. And alhamdulillah, that doesn't seem to be an issue. I generally have a principle that I at least like to talk to people on occasion, twice a year, and I at least like to see them once a year when possible if they happen to not be local. But of course, that's not absolute, and it's an average. But generally speaking, this is really an issue of the heart. Where is a person's heart planted? The relationship is also individualized. What that means is that it's generally one-on-one. The shaykh gets to know the student just like the student gets to know the shaykh, and it's based on that interaction that the shaykh and the student can make adjustments that allow the person to be able to reach their peak and pinnacle. So I place a huge premium personally on getting to know each of my students. I have, a cadence of interactions with them. It can't be so extensive and frequent that I'm completely paralyzed, but it's also not so rare and distant that I don't know who they are. And this basically allows for an individualized relationship. They get to know me, I get to know them, and that's essential for this. So why am I saying this? When you're thinking about this aspect of spiritual development and you're seeking a teacher, know that this is something that is important. So it's not like you just join a gathering and then no one ever knows who your name is, and you just come and go and you disappear and there's no personalized attention. That's not the purpose or goal here. You can benefit from that. I'm not saying that you can't benefit, but the real goal is to have some degree of individualization. So that's something that we should all seek, and it's beneficial, and it is one of the ways by which people can advance to their full potential. Just as an example, the Prophet ﷺ once said to famous companion Abu Dhar, "O Abu Dhar, I can see that you are weak, and truly I want for you only that which I want for myself. So never judge between two parties, and never become responsible for the welfare of an orphan." It's a very interesting statement. Here, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that he is establishing the relationship between the two of them. That we know each other so well, let's go back for a moment, we know each other so well that I know you're weak. I know your weaknesses. That's basically what's being said. I know your weaknesses. And I only want for you that which I want for myself. Meaning we have a relationship. I know you and you know me. I understand your weaknesses. And I only want for you that which I want for myself. Now look at the advice that's given. It's phenomenal. So don't judge between two parties and don't become responsible for the welfare of an orphan. If I asked anybody in this room, is it a good deed to become responsible for the welfare of an orphan? Everybody would raise their hand. If I asked anybody in this room, is it a good deed to judge between two parties? Everybody would raise their hand. Here the Prophet ﷺ, in his interaction with Abu Dhar, is highlighting that based on your circumstances, these are two things that I would suggest that you avoid, despite the fact that these are actually good things to do. So it's highlighting the depth of that relationship and the individualized attention. And really that's what this is all about. One of the main features in the science of Tasawwuf is that the Shaykh gets to know the student gets to know the Shaykh, and as they move together along that path, it's titrated. It's understood that this is good for you, this is bad for you, this is your particular circumstance, we need to have your own particular prescription. It's like individualized medicine. In this day and age, we're headed towards individualized medicine where, for example, if somebody has a cancer, we take a piece of it, we sequence it, we figure out the targets, and then we treat the targets. It's very individualized. This is individualized medicine, but existing for 1400 years now. Spiritual medicine, for that matter. I've already mentioned this, but I'm going to repeat it again. It's clouded in imperfection. Again, we're not looking for perfection in this relationship. Shaykh is a human being. Students are human beings. And the people who come from the outside are also human beings. Meaning the people who come who are not part of the relationship and are observing from the outside, they're all human beings. We're all imperfect. We are all imperfect. The Prophet ﷺ said, all of the children of Adam are sinners. All of the children of Adam are sinners. And the best of sinners are those who repent. So yes, we expect that when a mistake occurs, that our teachers will repent. By the way, this applies to all dimensions, whether this is a teacher in fiqh or a teacher in hadith or a teacher of Quran, etc. We expect when they make a mistake to repent. That's the distinguishing feature between us and the people who sin repeatedly. So the students are expected to seek forgiveness when they make a mistake in their life, and the Shaykh is expected to seek forgiveness when they make a mistake in their life. Now, of course, we all aim to avoid mistakes, but there's not going to be any perfection. We're all doing the best that we can. Hopefully, we're avoiding as many mistakes as we can. Hopefully, we're protecting ourselves by controlling the environment, etc., as I'm going to give much more detail on later on today. But essentially, this is a principle that we can't avoid. So if you're looking for, the summary is, if you're looking for perfection in the Shaykh, you're not going to find it. If you're looking for perfection in the students, you're not going to find it. What you're going to find instead is that everyone's well-intentioned. This relationship is well-intentioned. That has to be there. If the shaykh intention is to take money from the students, that's criminal. That's not a shaykh, that's a criminal. If the intention is to collect money from the students for their own personal welfare, then that's criminal. We're not talking about that. That's not well-intentioned. So we have to keep that in mind, right? That this needs to be a well-intentioned interaction, which then will allow everyone to benefit. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, verily the people will only be raised for judgment based on their intentions. Verily the people will only be raised for judgment based on their intentions. Now once that's understood and this environment begins to develop of teachers and students, then we should know that the environment provides many benefits. So look, there's two benefits, let's say this. One benefit is the direct engagement, well there's three. One benefit is the engagement with this teacher. The student learns from the shaykh learns from the student, that's benefit one. Benefit two is the general environment that's created. It's inspiring. People come, people get inspired, people have something to attach themselves to. A group of people are striving. When a group of people are striving, it's a great place to inspire people. So that's benefit number two. There's many, I'm just giving three here. The third is that it creates an environment that attracts Allah's forgiveness and His mercy. The third is that it creates an environment that attracts Allah's forgiveness and His mercy. On one occasion, an angel was told, there's a hadith in which an angel was told by Allah that he had forgiven the sins of those present in a certain group that were engaged in dhikr. So let's take a step back. There was a group of people that were engaged in dhikr. The message of the angels pile up on that group and they present this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that this group of people is engaged in dhikr. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that He forgives all of the people present in that gathering. I think all of you have heard this. It's a very famous hadith. So essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all of the people in that gathering. Now, the angels then make an observation, and then they raise a question based on that observation. So the observation is, but wait a minute, there's one person who's actually a sinner. He's a sinner, and he sat down in the gathering, not because he wanted to join the gathering, but he was just resting. He just happened to pass by and a bunch of people were sitting. He's a sinner. He sat down to rest. His intention was not dhikr. His intention was not Allah. His intention was not the gathering. He just sat down to rest. So Allah says, and I forgive him too. Even those who come only to sit with these people will not be deprived. Even those who just randomly sit will not be deprived. Now, 2 points that I'll make here. 1 point, these gatherings are always beneficial for all of us. When there's a gathering of pious individuals who are striving to develop themselves, particularly the gatherings of dhikr, and by the way, this is broad. Dhikr can be knowledge, can be Quran, can be the dhikr of the tongue. Anytime we sit in those gatherings, we're going to benefit. Because those are reported by the angels to Allah, and Allah forgives the entire gathering. Number 2, even the casual participant benefits. So even when we bring somebody who doesn't want to be there, but is willing to come, they'll benefit. Just by entering the gathering, they'll benefit. They don't even need to worry about what's going to be said and what, etc. They will just benefit just by having stepped into the gathering. And this also raises another issue, which is that sometimes people will approach me and they will say, well, I want to become a student of this path, but I'm not ready. I look at all the other students and I see that they are so advanced, or they seemingly are so advanced, but I'm not ready. What should I do? I'm waiting. I've decided to wait a few months. I'm going to clean up my life and everything, and then I'm going to think about the next step. And usually what I advise them is that, well, if you get to the next step, you probably don't need me anyway. If you're going to get to the next step by yourself, you don't need me. I'm there if you need me. I'm not there because you have to come. So this is kind of also highlighted in this principle that, look, there's this metaphysical gathering of people that are all trying to benefit and do dhikr, correct? And improve themselves. Dhikr is one component of it. So if somebody just has the notion in their head that I want to change and benefit, that's sufficient. There's no other expectation. When a person comes to become a student, this is the key thing. When I interact with them, I ascertain, I basically say, look, I need you to understand what I'm about. I need you to understand the principles that underlie what I'm trying to achieve. I need you to review the things that I've said and what happens in the gatherings. You need to be fully comfortable with that. If you're fully comfortable with that, I'm here for you. If you're not comfortable, then go seek another avenue, no problem. But if you're fully comfortable with that, then I'm here for you. It's not contingent upon you being able to do A, B, or C. It's not about that. It's about you finding the right place to plant your seed, the seed of your heart, where it can grow. So this is something that I would just sort of say as a secondary point in this conversation. Now, given all of this, the scholars of spiritual development place emphasis on finding a shaykh and joining their gatherings, meaning given all the benefits that we talked about, given the fact that it's informed in these ways, the scholars of Tasawwuf, they place a big premium on finding a shaykh and joining their gatherings. In fact, I would argue that if you had to say one word about Tasawwuf, if you said to me, summarize Tasawwuf in one word, summarize the path of Tasawwuf in one word, it would be the shaykh. That's really what defines Tasawwuf. Because everything else is constitutive anyway, right? All Muslims are looking for good company. All Muslims are engaging in dhikr. All Muslims are trying to avoid sin. All Muslims should be suppressing their animalistic desires and aiming for the hereafter. What is central to all of this is the teacher. The teacher and the gathering of the students, the classroom. Let's put it that way. The classroom is central. So if you ask me, what's the key thing in a college? Is the key thing the Union Square, the bookstore, the campus, the students, the teacher? I would say the classroom, right? This would be the key thing, the classroom. The teacher-student interaction is the key thing. So in Tasawwuf, if we wanted to highlight the key interaction, it would be the interaction between the teacher and the student and the classroom that's created. So that's why I say here on the screen, the scholars of Tasawwuf place emphasis on finding a shaykh and on joining their gatherings. Now, once those gatherings are identified, then the maintenance of that connection is going to be an essential feature of that spiritual engagement. And the term for that is called rabita. Rabita. Rabita is a term that refers to the connection of the student with the shaykh and the gatherings of the shaykh. So for example, rabita is a key core principle in Tasawwuf, and basically what it means is that a person should be connected with their heart, with the gathering, and they should be present when possible and convenient for them. So they show up when they can to whatever the gatherings that are being held. Their heart obviously is connected in general. They stay in touch with the teacher. They communicate with the teacher. They make their best effort to do the various assignments of dhikr that are assigned by the teacher. This is all called rabita, or connection. And this connection is essential for a person to maintain the benefit of the gathering. So this is another point that we emphasize in the science of Tasawwuf.